And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pumpkin Coptercast, the only video game show. So today, my guest is a person who has as many voice credits at Wadjeteye Games as Jeffrey Combs does in Star Trek. I am joined by Abe Goldfarb.
How's it going?
Good. So
Good.
before we get into the interview proper, I'd like to, you know, play a little game that I always do at the start of my show. Today, we are going to be playing a game called Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Dark Souls.
Okay.
Because what we're going to do is I'm going to list off three names, and you're going to tell me if it's either a monster from Yu-Gi-Oh! Or a boss from Dark Souls. Because
I
if
mean, I have to warn you, I have no knowledge of either of those things, so this is going to be purely random.
yeah,
I do a lot more voicing for games than I do playing of games, it has to be said.
well, I mean, both franchises, but have characters with like nonsensical names, so you'll basically be in the same boat as most of my other guests who have
Okay,
played this.
great, great.
Let's see. All right. Well, first we'll start with Geist Grinder Golem, Yu-Gi-Oh or Dark Souls.
Well, it sounds less cutesy pie, which is kind of in my mind what Yu-Gi-Oh is, so I'm going to say Dark Souls.
Incorrect. It is Yu-Gi-Oh.
All right.
All right. Next, let's see. Next is Aldrich Devourer of Gods.
Dark
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Souls?
Or... yes, correct. A boss
Okay,
from
all
Dark
right.
Souls 3.
Okay.
And...
I think I'm just looking for the dark. If a name sounds dark, I'm assuming it's Dark Souls. But go on. One more. Let's do it. Let's hit it.
Alright. And next, and the last one for today. Let's see, which one is the most ridiculous sounding name? Let's see, oh darn, I had it and I lost it. Here we go. Kumongus, the sticky string kaiju.
I'm not gonna lie, that does sound like Yu-Gi-Oh to me, but I'm guessing I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
All right.
It is indeed Yu-Gi-Oh! Because, if you think of anything you've ever seen in any movie ever, there's a chance it's been referenced in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card somewhere.
Noted.
So, anyway, now we can move on to the actual meat and taters of this interview.
Great. We've loosened up.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Abe, let's start things off with you just introducing yourself to my 10 viewer at home.
Hi, my name is Abe Goldfarb. I'm an actor, writer, director, and just sort of whatever else I'm needed for. I suppose that's me. Just your basic song and dance man,
Okay. Um, so, I mean, you've mentioned that you voice characters in games more than you play games, but like at what point did you discover there's video games?
Well, I mean, I'm really stuck in the past on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it never got better than the Super Nintendo. That was like the maximum number of buttons that I found acceptable for a controller.
Yep.
And I recognize I'm fully dating myself here. I'm 45, so the kids are so facile with this stuff now. They're so good at it, and watching people play with these astoundingly complex controllers, I've always appreciated that Nintendo, even as they've sort of gotten more advanced, the worst they ever did was the GameCube, and then after that they were like, all right, let's keep it real simple. But no, I got into video games when I was quite young, and it was the 8-bit system, the NES or the Famicom, as it was known in Japan. And I discovered on that, not just sort of platformers, but also those kind of slightly these decomplexified RPGs, because there's only so much you can do
Mm-hmm.
with those buttons and with the 8-bit graphics and with how much memory that thing had. But Legend of Zelda, the Ultima ports on the NES. And then, yeah, that was kind of my childhood, and I discovered the single greatest video game of all time, which is very clearly Super Mario Brothers 3. I just don't think there is. I've played games.
Mm-hmm.
People sort of. It's very Michael Corleone. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in, and I'll play a game, and to be honest, every time I play a game, all I can think of is I'd much rather be playing Super Mario 3. It's great because you have the side-scrolling action that you
Mm-hmm.
love from a Super Mario game. You've got fabulous, sort of more, a greater variety of forms you can turn into, and you've got that great RPG map. I don't know. It's the whole damn meal for me. So that was what I came up on. Also, and this ties into my work with Wadjeteye. I grew up on the NES, and I grew up on Sierra adventure games.
Mm-hmm.
King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest. Less Police Quest. Even when I was a kid, I was really uncomfortable with cops. But Manhunter, and yeah, just that was it. That was the stuff I loved. And I think the first time that I heard and saw full performances in a game was Martian Memorandum, Tex Avery mystery. I always loved those. And that was the first time that I saw this kind of like insanely hyper-pixelated, we got our friend from work to come in and put a little costume on and play a part, acting performances in these games. And I just loved it. I
Mm-hmm.
loved all that stuff.
I mean, well, you answered the next question without even trying, which is what was your favorite game and or games growing up, and
Well, I think we just did
Super
it.
Mario Bros. 3 is, if you had to pick one, that's a pretty darn good one.
Either that or like Wing Commander 2 from Origin for the PC, which was just you had those beautiful VGA graphics and like that great combat mechanism and all this terrific, very cinematic story. I just loved it. That's the stuff that I really loved.
Okay. And I know you favor games from back in the day more than you do games now, but has there been any game now that has, either captured that feeling or like has you felt has come close as you think a games today can?
I mean, I'm kind of an old fuddy-duddy, I really that's the stuff that I came up with. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
I also think this ties into, I'm going to go off on so many tangents during this interview. I think this ties into a major cultural problem we have, which is this kind of assumption of people, certainly around my age, that the stuff we grew up with is culturally like primal. Like this is the stuff that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Not primal, but primary. It's one of the reasons that we have a lot of franchises that in theory are made for kids, but are actually made to feed the kind of nostalgia monster living in the stomach of people from my generation, which is, Gen X, elder millennials. And it's something we need to get past. I'm perfectly happy understanding that culture right now is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean it's not for me like I'm not into it. I just mean like it shouldn't be geared towards me. The stuff that I loved growing up was made for teenagers in the 1990s. And that was really, really cool. And I think that's something we have to work on culturally is just I think shareholders really love old franchises because they're demonstrably remunerative. But I remember the stuff that I really got into when I was a kid was stuff I'd never heard of before. And I think I really want to see more of that culturally when it comes to games, movies, TV.
Okay.
Anyway, that's a little tangent.
Okay. Hi, man. As you said in your introduction, you've worn many hats, and what we're talking about today is the truly like numerous like voice credits you have, and with Wadjeteye Games, like the point and clickiness game studio I have
Oh
encountered.
yeah.
So, how did you come to like work with them and continue to like work with them up to like the present times?
Well, it's all about Dave, Dave Gilbert, the man who founded Wadjeteye. We went to summer camp together in 1991, and we were both very creatively driven people.
Mm-hmm.
Even at that young age, we became instant friends. And he was a little older than me, like not much, but a little. And we shared that love of adventure games. And I used to go over to his place. It was a few towns over on Long Island, and we'd play adventure games in the basement, mostly Sierra. And I had never really done any voice acting. When it came to the mid 2000s, I was sort of just returned from theater school. I went to the Bristol Old Vic in the UK, and I was trying to carve out a career here. And Dave was making these games. Some of them just in competitions, for like these little sort of quick weekend builds or whatever. And then he started making a longer form game called the Shiva, which was, I believe, the first Wadjeteye game.
Huh.
And he released that, and it was a murder mystery about a rabbi. And the game had attained a certain cachet, and he was like, well, I want a voice for it. And so I came in, and he voiced the whole game. He got a lot of actors together from, like, some of them were from an improv group he was in. And he asked me to voice the lead, Rabbi Stone, and I had never done anything like it. And listening back, something I'm working on is being proud of stuff that I'm embarrassed by, because there's work that I've done that means a lot to a lot of people, but for me, I'll hear it and I'll just be like, that is a profoundly unevolved version of what I do, and I have to sort of be okay with the fact that no, that was then. I had no idea what I was doing, so I just maybe 2005, 2006. Well, yeah, but around that time we did the Shiva, and I had a crappy little telemarketer headset on, and that's how Dave used to record the vocals before we had legit mics. And then, out of that came the Blackwell games, which were, the big Wadjeteye franchise is the Blackwell game. Because that games, 5 games. And you can hear me over the course of the series becoming so much more confident. And that was basically my boot camp. That was like learning in the most savage environment possible, where it's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna try. And little by little, by the end of the series, I think I was basically acceptable as a voice actor. But really, Dave led me on a long ramp up to that, and I'll be eternally grateful for that.
Okay.
But yeah, we'd known each other for a decade and a half, before he ever started making those games. And yeah, that's where I started. Before I did any cartoon work, before I did any other games, that was it.
I honestly had no idea that's how it got started.
Oh yeah. One of my dearest, oldest friends. I've known him now for 34 years.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Time. There's so much of it, but unfortunately it's linear.
Yeah, let's see. See if I can find the actual time.
I'm trying not to make my couch creak too loudly.
That's fine.
I'm recording this on my couch.
So, goodness, I forgot how long ago. I actually sat down with Dave, like 4 years ago now.
4 years, that's nothing.
This show's been going on a fair bit, like, shorter amount of time than you've been voice acting, so, yeah, and, yep, yeah, and, like, like, last year I had played through the Shiva. I had no idea that was, like, the first of the Wadjeteye games, and...
Yeah, that was the launch.
Goodness.
He had made something previous to that, I think, that was not sort of mainline Wadjeteye, called, I think, Bestowers of Eternity. And if you're ever able to find that was on the this old adventure game engine, and you can see so much of what Dave eventually became from his work with that. It was really, really special. I mean, he's been very, very, very focused and true about the themes and ideas that interest him, and they've evolved amazingly. But also, it's like, wow, man, he's been chasing the same set of fascinations for a very long time, which I think is true of any interesting artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're playing variations on a theme and complexifying them, and yeah, just that's how you grow. You plow your furrow and find new fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Abe, as someone who is, not in the voice acting like industry, and as I was just like looking up to get a better scope of your work, what would you say is the difference between like you recording lines for like one of the Blackwell Games voice versus like you recording lines for a show?
I mean, the difference is uh, the method of storytelling. You know, you're
Mm-hmm.
recording for a game, you're recording multiple paths. You know, you've got so many branching stories. So really, there's no sense of linearity in the storytelling when you're voicing a game,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're voicing like a pretty small character, in which case, you know, it's a limited scope, but you're still doing multiple responses to any one question. Voicing for a show, I mean, that's just straight ahead. That is
Mm-hmm.
just here's the beginning of my arc, here's the end of my arc. And the challenge when you're voicing a game is to keep that same level of excitement when you're doing, let's say, anything from the biggest to the smallest variation in terms of the choices that the player is making. You have to stay invested in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a little bit maddening at times because you're like, geez, like how can I mean all of this? You know, but you're subject, if you're the protagonist of a game, certainly, you're subject to the whims of the player. And so that's the main difference, is just keeping your level of investment in the arc of a character with any kind of clarity, while at the same time doing, you know, 50 branching possibilities.
Okay. And they if to anyone watching this at home, I'm really not exaggerating. I'm probably under exaggerating when I compare like Abe's voice credits on like the Wadjeteye Games to like Jeffrey Combs in Star Trek, because I've played. I'm like slowly playing through Wadjeteye Games like entire catalog, and I have yet to play a game that you're not in.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like one game Wadjet is distributed that I'm not in. I think, and it was like Hobbs Barrow,
Huh.
or rather, I don't think that is Wadjet, but Dave sort of voice cast it. But yeah, no, but also the Jeffrey Combs comparison is very, very kind. Jeffrey Combs is a fucking, pardon my language, an absolute legend, a total master. If you want to see the stuff he's really, like, he's amazing on Star Trek. If you want to see another side to him, I recommend looking up his work with the director Stuart Gordon. Films like Reanimator, From Beyond, you know, really astonishing lower budget genre fare, in which Combs was giving unbelievably brilliant and theatrical performances. He was sort of goofing on genre types while at the same time giving a fully embodied performance. Incredible. He's also really brilliant in Peter Jackson's The Frighteners, which is very underseen and kind of
Oh
a,
yeah, that's a good one.
it's a bit of a missing link for most people in Jackson's filmography. But to me, it's like the very obvious bridge between his smaller work in New Zealand and what he achieved with Lord of the Rings, because there's digital effects in there in The Frighteners that nobody was even attempting at the time in 1996. And all of that carries forward and evolves with Lord of the Rings. And Combs, you know, Combs is horrifying in that movie.
Oh
He's
yeah.
absolutely incredible. Anyway, my point is, it's a very kind comparison. And I think I will never be able to imagine myself existing even on the same, you know, in the same neighborhood as Jeffrey Combs. But thank you very much.
Okay. So, back in the day, I asked David this question, and I suppose since you're like one of the since you were one of the two main characters of the franchise, I suppose who better to ask? I mean, without wishing to like give too much of like the Blackwell games away, because like Those
I
are
think we need a spoiler
dynamite.
more. I mean, they've been around
Yeah.
for a minute. You know,
We're
King Kong dies at the end. You know, the Titanic sinks. At this point, we're outside the statute of limitations for
okay then.
spoilers.
Uh, but you know, at the very end of like of the last game in the series, they when you had recorded your last lines and you were able to like see the finished product, were you happy with like the way with the way like, you know, Rosa and like Joey's like journeys ended in the games?
I think Dave couldn't have written a better ending. I think it was absolutely beautiful what Dave did there at the end. I wish, you know, I'm always gonna wish I'd given a better performance of it, but the writing is absolutely superb. So I think like the end of that journey was it was very fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very complete. I think for all of us. And there's always people who are like, what about another Blackwell game? And I got to be honest, I think that's about. Maybe Dave thinks differently. It's been a minute since the last game, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to me that is about as perfect and a don't fuck withable an ending as you possibly could,
Yeah.
as you possibly could have for a series. Like, don't mess it up. That's it. It's neat. It's tidy. It's tied in a bow.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we can only like speculate about like what happens after the credits roll in the final one, but Abe, in your opinion, do you think Joey had a good like second chance at life after everything?
I mean, I don't know. I think I kind of stopped thinking about it when I finished.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, my guess is he's incredibly lonely,
Yeah.
you know, but I think that's sort of the condition of everyone intimately involved with the story. If the series is about anything, I think it's about loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean, I don't know. I couldn't begin to tell you. I think Dave would probably have a better idea than I would. But my feeling is that even if Joey does all right for himself, and he finally does have a shot at an actual tangible life, and I'm very moved by that. I don't know. I think loneliness is just going to be something that he lives with and dies with.
Okay.
That's me.
And I guess I'm gonna pivot a bit. Well, not the most recent one. Recent like Wadjeteye playthrough, but one that's definitely stuck with me the most. So hold on, let's see. Let me just do. Uh, do, do, do. Oh gosh, where is it? Of course, this just doesn't format. But you know, near the tail end of well, hold on, not near the. Actually, I think it's almost we're coming up on the 1 year. But I managed to recently talk to two of. Yeah, I talked to James and Mark who worked on Strangeland,
Oh,
and
Strangeland. I loved
oh,
voicing that.
like goodness me, that was. Let me tell you, you want some like tonal whiplash in your video games. You play through that, and then like the very next day, you start playing through the HD release of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and that's what we call a major juxtaposition of moods.
I would have to say so. Yes, Strangelands is that's a tough one. That's a tough one. That is a brutally dark piece of storytelling.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I mean, there was a lot of discussion about whether I was capable of it because, to be honest, it was very daunting. You know, because I'm not just playing the main character; I'm playing these manifestations of his despair and depression. For anyone who's not played it, it is a surrealist odyssey about grief. You know, and that's not immediately commercial. I'm really glad that people played it. I'm really glad that people loved it. That was the impression that I got, was very positive from the people who played it. That's one of the only voice performances where I can listen back to it and be like, I think that's about as good as I could have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one, I think I can honestly say, okay, like that one, there's very little that I would change. I don't know what I could have done to do better with it, with my own inherent limitations. But I loved voicing those characters. But it was emotionally really draining. You're dealing with self-loathing, anxiety, depression,
Yeah,
things I've never heard of.
I mean,
But yeah,
what a concept.
right. It's a game that it encompasses a lot of the worst parts of feeling mentally and emotionally unwell and unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to dig deep with that one. Not to sound pretentious or actory, but that game, I'm really, really proud of it. I think everyone's really proud of it. I think it's great to look at, great to listen to. I think the entire voice cast is fantastic. And I think the journey it takes the player on is one that's very special and very different. Because it's not so much about, like, winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not a game where you get to the end and you get a cookie.
Yeah.
You sort of, you get all, or like I was going to say, or a fireworks display. There is some beautiful visual stuff at the end. But it's not a traditionally, quote unquote, satisfying game. It's satisfying if you find yourself emotionally wrapped up in it,
Mm-hmm.
which thankfully a lot of people were.
Yeah. I mean, back when I interviewed James and Mark about it, this was just a comparison that, crossed into my brain. I mean, you just mentioned that it's, not a game about just winning in the traditional sense when we think of video games. It kind of reminds me just a little bit of the Psychonauts games
Oh yeah.
in the sense that, like you said, it's a really surreal, like, visual representation of, how you said, like, grief and loss and, like, mental illness. And, that is, it kind of remind me of Psychonauts. In, like, the vast majority of the levels, you go into, like, video game levels that are, like, visual representations of whatever mental issues the
Yeah.
characters you're helping are going through. And, like, and what I've noticed, especially in, like, the second one, is, like, you do, like, beat the level, quote unquote, and win, but, like, the issues the characters have, like, once you emerge from their mind, they're still there. Like, I saw it, the way I saw it when I played through, like, Psychonauts 1 and 2 is, like, you're not,
Mm.
like, curing their mental demons, you're just making it so that it's not, like, eating their brain from the inside out, and, like, they can,
Right.
it's, like, like, something they can, live with, because, like, I mean, there's this, it's been a few years, but, I don't know, just slight spoilers for, like, Psychonauts 2, just because there's like, one level specifically that, I think of when I'm thinking about, the representation of the unnamed person's mindset in Strangeland is, like, there is, like, one of the levels you go to in Psychonauts, it's revealed that like, one of the characters, like, lost his mom at a young age to alcoholism. And, in, like, the game, in Psychonauts the game, you collect, like, figments, like, of a person's imagination, like, representations of, like, small representations of, like, the larger issue. And, like, one of the things is, like, alcohol bottles, like, things are just generally in a mess. And there's, like, the way you, like, enter the level in the first place is, like, the character is basically, like, isolated, like, within his, like, mental landscape. He's, like, on an island, just, like, completely alone, and he doesn't, like, and within the context of that, like, little mental world, he doesn't, like, see or interact with everyone until Rasputin, the main character, shows up.
Mm.
And again, as you progress through that level, like, the things you see, and, like, the boss you fight at the end is, like, much like in Strangeland, just, like, a visual representation of, like, the issues he has. And,
Yes, the big boss is feelings.
yeah, basically. And, that reminded me of that.
amazing.
Yeah.
But
So.
yeah, I mean, I find that you know, when it comes to any kind of art form, it can be a book, it can be a song, it can be a movie, it can be a game. I'm way less interested in plot than I am in story.
Mm-hmm.
Because plot is just stuff that happens, but story is everything else. Like, think about this: the plot of The Wizard of Oz is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
The plot of it is this girl's house gets ripped out of the ground by a tornado. She lands on a witch, has to go for a long hike, picks up some strangers, and makes a wish in a giant castle. That's meaningless. But a story, a story about a youth who learns to value things that perhaps previously she's taken for granted,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that kind of meaning, you know, I actually think that, I mean, that's a story.
Yeah.
And I feel like when it comes to games like Strangeland, that's a perfect example of how story is so much more important than plot.
Mm-hmm.
Because the story of it, and from the sounds of it, Psychonauts, the story is one of deep internal turmoil, which is how most of us experience the world.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have lives of relentless incident. Most of the stuff that happens to us will never be noticed by anyone. and,
Mm-hmm.
and so I appreciate stories where the point of it is, you know, the interiority
Yeah.
of a situation, where that's the story. I enjoy that very much.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, oh goodness, way back in what is considered ancient times in like video games. It's like the video game journey, in which, you know, like the story, as you said, is like you play as this weird, maybe it's a cat, maybe it isn't thing. Like it's just like sitting in a desert, and like the story is you climb up to the top of the mountain, and while there is like, you know, a plot and like a story like within the context of the game,
Mm.
uh, like I've like a lot of like it's become like a really personal story, because like in that game, like it's multiplayer but not in like the traditional sense. You don't like click and like join a lobby. You're just essentially just randomly connected with someone else who is also playing that game, like almost seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't like, there's no voice chat, and you can only communicate with the weird, I don't know, I want to say magic chirping sounds that you make. And so basically you have to form like well, you have to advance and like see all the things in the game that was like the true like quote unquote plot and story. Like I A big thing about that game is that, you know, it, for a lot of people, like the real story is about just, you know, having this journey and finding this method of communication with a stranger that you've never like interacted directly with before, and the chances of you interacting with like them again are like really small.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right on.
So, Abe, of all the many, many, many characters you voiced in Wadjeteye over the years, who is? Do you have any favorites? Do you have any like, you know, a few? Like, which one? If like someone brought you a picture of like that character to sign, you'd be like, yeah, you got him.
What? What? God, that's a wild question. The assumption that anybody would possibly would come up to me needing an autograph is madness. Although, you know, I mean, I've toured with Beetlejuice the musical, and so I did do a lot of stage touring and signing there. But even there, I felt a bit like I was pretending.
Mm-hmm.
But let's, gosh, favorite character. I mean, if there's one that I'm most sentimentally attached to, it's probably Joey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but let me think, because I've done so many. Some really really wild stuff. There was one I remember called The New Guys. That was a wildly absurd. It was called The New Guys: Day of the Jackass, and it was a weird kind of wrestling adventure comedy game. And I played this sort of like baby Hannibal Lecter in it, and that I had a
Huh.
lot of fun. I loved that very very much. But yes, I love what I've done for the upcoming game Old Skies, which is another Dave Gilbert original, and that I love deeply. that one I had a lot of notes to play. So I mean, like, if I had to choose one sentimentally, I would probably say Joey.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to choose one for the challenge of it, I would say The Stranger in Strangeland. And if there's one that is just like that, I for sheer fun, it would be Danu Guys, and then Old Skies. I'm playing some notes I haven't had the chance to play before. So yeah, I'm not being very helpful here because like I just yeah, I can't do it. I can't choose a favorite. How do you choose a favorite baby? I don't know. I have no idea. I just like working, but Joey is, you know, because of the arc of my learning over the years of voicing for Dave, I think probably the most important to me emotionally.
Okay.
Yeah. Forgive me, that was a vastly overlong answer.
Oh, it's fine. So, I know voicing like Joey is not the same as like voicing like Rabbi Russell Stone, but like, and I know each voice role you have to put a little something different into it, but like again, as someone who is not gonna be, as someone who isn't a voice actor, you know, I mean, who knows in the future? Like, how long? Like, let's say in like one of the Blackwell games, like, how long did it take for you to like record your lines and like pick the version of that line that would be put into the game?
Well, I didn't pick them.
Oh,
No, I mean that's all down to Dave. Dave is the director and the writer of those games.
well, shows
So I
what I
mean,
know.
yeah, I mean, no, I mean, God, when you're hired as a voice actor, you have no control whatsoever about what takes are going to make it into the game. But you know, I mean, it's a few sessions, you know, when you do a game
Mm-hmm.
like that. I mean, gosh, they're so spread out. You know, it's not spaced like a work week. You know, you'll do 1 or 2 days of recording one week, no recording the next week, 3 days the week after that. But yeah, you're doing a few hours here and there, and I'm sure it adds up. I have no concept of how much it actually added up to in the end. But no, I mean, we have absolutely zero control over how our performances come out. You know, but I think that's when you're an actor, you're at the mercy of the edit. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what you're doing, and the edit is where it is all done. You know, and Dave is a very, very good editor, and I trust him to pick the takes that work best.
Okay. Um. Yeah, and I suppose next would be, what sort of advice would you give to someone who's getting into like acting, like within specifically like in like the context of video games?
I mean, probably I don't probably have a lot of very valuable advice because my path into this was so unconventional, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I'm also not a very big deal. You know, I'm pretty small potatoes in the voice acting community, whether it's in cartoons or in games. And so, I mean, I can't really the advice you know, actually, okay, here's the advice I can give. Surround yourself with people who you enjoy creating with. But I think that's true of any art form. It
Mm-hmm.
really is all about find out your point of view as an artist and make things with other people. Find your people and create. And then you'll. The career stuff is. I should probably pay more attention to it than I do because I need to make a living. But, like, career for me will always come second to making sure that I'm surrounded with people who are creative and interesting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and compassionate and smart. And yeah, ideally, you'll make things with those people that help you discern what your point of view is as an artist and as a human. That's what I would say. Make stuff. Find your people and make stuff with them.
I mean, you heard it here, and I think with on that particularly well phrased note, we can bring this episode of the Punk and Copter Cast to a close. And before we sign out, Abe, is there anything you would like to shamelessly plug?
Oh, God, yes, of course. I put out a movie last year called First Time Caller that I co-directed with J.D. Brand, and I starred in it with Brian Silliman, and I'm really proud of it. And you can rent or buy it in a million different places online. You can also watch it with ads on Tubi for free. It is a story about the end of the world set in an asshole's basement, and it's a really fun movie. So first time caller, look that up. And I just put out a really gross little horror story on Kindle. It's called Sheepneck, one word, Sheepneck.
Oh,
So look up Sheepneck by Abe Goldfarb on Kindle, and yeah, enjoy that really disgusting art.
okay. And when all y'all listening to this at home are done checking out his stuff, you can go to youtube.com/the Pumpkin Coptercast, which hopefully that's where you're watching this, and give a like and subscribe. And if for some reason, if you have any money left over after, renting and or buying First Time Caller by Abe Goldfarb, if you have any left over, you can go to patreon.com/the Pumpkin Coptercast, where for as little as $1 a month, you can submit questions for me to use in future interviews. And if you enjoy hearing my word talks and you want to hear some more word talks of mine, you can go to, on your podcast platform of choice, you can go to look for Gotta Recap 'Em All, a podcast with my various co-hosts where we are slowly recapping every episode of the Pokemon anime and all the movies.
I mean, you know that I'm in that, right?
Yes, as I was looking you up, I was like, oh my gosh, you're Ash's surrogate dad, Professor Kukui.
Yeah, it's Professor Kukui, and I was Dr. Zarasic and Boldor and Silvally. That was a lot of fun. I loved doing that stuff.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that was great.
Oh, and Grubbin. Loved Grubbin. That was great.
Yeah, we recap all the Pokemon anime. The one with the guns? Yeah. The one that gave kids seizures back in the 90s? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell
yeah.
And until next time, everyone, this has been Debbie of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I say at the end of every episode, have a gourd day, everyone.